find a thing you're frightened to think about. Just identify it. Like, there's something about my job, there's something about my spouse, and I'm scared to think about it. I don't want to think about it, don't want to think about it, don't want to think about it. The irony is that the fear is only there because we already know what's inside there. If you've ever read The Divine Comedy, it starts out with him saying, in the middle of my life, I came to myself in a dark wood and the true way had been lost. So he's in this forest. It's foggy, it's dark, it's swampy. There are wild animals and he's confused. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I think a lot of people sort of snap into consciousness at some point in their life when they've wandered from the true path and they're miserable and they don't know why. It's very foggy and swampy, but it's just not right. And he looks around and he sees this mountain rising out of the murk. And he calls it Mount Delectable. Yeah, Dilitoso Monte, I think is what it is. I don't even speak Italian. But it translates to Mount Delectable. And he sees all these people climbing it. And the sun is coming up and the mountain looks all golden and glowy. And so he's like, that's how I get out of here. That's how I get happy. So he starts climbing, because this is what culture does. It gives us those manic high points and bathes them in a golden glow and says, if you get up here, you'll be happy. But as he goes, ferocious beasts keep pushing him back down the mountain. And the ferocious beasts all have an emotional quality. So there's a wolf that makes him super sad. There's a leopard that just makes him desperate. That word again. And there's, what's the one that makes him, there's a lion that is so frightening that the air is afraid of it. So what happens to us when we start climbing the cultural, the pyramid, is that our emotions say, no. And we get scared, we get anxious, we get depressed. We don't know why. And it drives Dante back down the mountain. And there he meets a guide who says, for everybody, the only way out is through. We have to go not up, but down. We're going into, he calls it among the lost people. But I read it as the lost aspects of Dante himself and of each of us. Part of us we have a lost self. And to get to it, we have to go into the inferno. Not what one typically wants to do, but it's the only way to paradise.
Yeah, I love that analogy and how it links to integrity, because to me, I've always described it as the mountain and the valley, and the idea that we've always felt that our journey has to be forwards and upwards, but actually I think the journey is deeper and inwards, and we've always felt that the skills that get us to the top, actually it's the opposite skills that let us go down the valley.
Right. When I was 18 and very, very depressed, it's the first time I read The Divine Comedy, and I didn't care about the literature. I just wanted help. Yeah. And what helped me so much was that he goes down through the inferno. Things get worse and worse and worse and worse. And they get to the very bottom. He and his guide get to the very pit of hell, which is the center of the earth. And the monster Lucifer is there, trapped in a lake of ice. And Dante just says, well, I guess this is us now. And Virgil, his guide, says, no, keep going the same direction. He's like, there's no more direction to go. And Virgil's like, no, you have to climb on the body of the monster. Like, he has to face his worst fear. So he's lowering himself down. And when he gets to the center of the earth, suddenly everything switches and he's going away from the center of the earth, which is up. He's going in the same direction, but instead of going into hell, he's now headed to heaven. And that was what got me through my depression when I was 18, that image.
Wow. Well, tell us a bit more about that. I think there are a lot of young people today and people across any age and generation struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, struggling with stress and mental health challenges. What was it for you that was so key at that time in your life that made you feel depressed? And then what was it that started to be the cure for that journey?
Yeah, the problem was that I was raised in a culture that didn't fit my true nature at all. I was raised in the most Mormon of Mormon places you can imagine, by a very, very Mormon family. And it just didn't really work for me, but I tried to make it work for a very long time. Well, 18 years. No, I kept trying after a while. I grew up also, but I was really trying up to that time, and it just wasn't working for me. At 17, I went off to Harvard, which is about as different from Mormon Central as you can get without going to Pluto. So now I was in this complete sort of atheist materialist culture. And my only really strong imperative as a personality is just please everyone, right? So I sort of adapted to my culture at Harvard and just sort of fit in there. And then I would go back to Utah and try to fit in there. And these two selves were so different that I lost my sense of what was true. So I just got incredibly depressed, like constant weeping, couldn't function at all, almost catatonic at a certain point. And I thought, I've got to figure out what's wrong with me. And I just started turning inward. I went straight into the pain. I went into my inferno, and I went down and down and down until I found the thing that was the most painful thing to me. And that thought, it was the thought, I don't know what's true. Because I was so split. And anybody who's been pulled different ways by different loved ones, different jobs, different national cultures or whatever, if you feel that lostness, that's the dark wood that Dante woke up in. I am so lost and I don't know why. And I didn't know what the answer would be, but I knew that the pathway was into my own suffering. And it worked. It took a while, but it worked.
It sounds like it's a scary journey, or a journey that requires one to be okay with, as you say in the book, going into the inferno and embracing that fear. How can people today feel more comfortable with discomfort? Because it's strange. We're talking about getting back to our nature, but it almost takes discomfort and fear and pain to get back to that which seems natural. So or explain that journey to me a bit, because I'm just I'm thinking about everyone who's listening and thinking, I don't want to accept that I'm not living in my truth, because that's scary. That means I might have to quit my job. It might mean I have to break up with my partner. It might mean that I have to move across country. Like, it means a lot of real things. And you work with real people all the time. So I know that you're greatly placed to help people. But that's what I'm trying to understand is what does someone do when they're like, well, I can't accept the truth because the truth will ruin my life?
We are all terrified of the truths that will take us away from the culture we belong to, the culture that makes us feel grounded in the world. If there's a truth that we've hidden because it doesn't work with that culture, we are terrified. So where does Virgil take Dante in the dark wood of Eric? He takes him to a gate and he says, here's where we're going in. And it says above the gate, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And Dante's like, I don't think that's a good sign, literally. And Virgil just pats him on the hand and says, trust me. And they go in, and it's horrible. So what I like to do with clients, and what I do in the book, is find, if you're not completely happy in your life, and I mean completely happy, I think we should be completely happy. So find a thing you're frightened to think about. And you don't need to think about it yet. Just identify it. Like, okay, there's something about my job and I'm scared to think of it. There's something about my spouse and I'm scared to think about it. I don't want to think about it. Don't want to think about it. Don't want to think about it. The irony is that the fear is only there because we already know what's inside there. Mm-hmm. What's inside, as you said, what's on the other side of that may mean a divorce. It may mean changing a career. It may mean giving up scotch, and we don't want to. We're as comfortable as we can be, clinging to our little dark wood of error things. But if we want to be free, the suffering gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And typically there are things that, like in Dante's case, a guide shows up. In our case, it might be a book, it might be a teacher, it might be a podcast like yours, but something says, walk up to that gate. Just walk up to it. And for me, the scariest thing was when I was 25 and I was now getting my doctorate, so my third Harvard degree. And I got pregnant for the second time I was married. And my son was prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome. The fear was like nothing I've ever experienced. And I just walked around Harvard and I looked at the professors instructors, I looked at the students, and they all looked really pinched and anxious. And I thought, geez, this is my third. I kept thinking, if I get another Harvard degree, I shall be happy. And it never worked. I was getting more and more tense. And then I thought, okay, is it possible for a person with Down syndrome to be happy? And everything I knew said yes. So I thought, okay, Emerson said beauty is its own excuse for being. Joy is the felt equivalent of beauty. Maybe joy is its own excuse for being. And if that's the case, then anyone who can feel joy belongs here as much as anybody else in the world. The fear I went through for the next several months as I waited, and they said there was a 40% chance he would die at birth, and all these things would ruin my older daughter's life. He would ruin my marriage, everything. I've never experienced fear like that. And it finally pushed me to a point where I broke. I went through the door, and I let myself feel all the fear. And it was just this, it was exactly the way Dante describes going to hell, just screams and noise and, wailing of it, like all silent, of course, in my own head. And then in the middle of that whole cacophony, I heard this one whisper that said, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure that's true?" And I was like, "I don't know what's true." And it said, "You may want to think about what's true." And that was the first moment that the fear let go of me. And I was like, I was in the inferno after that. So yeah, life will take you there.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's a very real result of going into the fear. And I liked what you said there, where you just allowed yourself to feel it and then ask whether it was true. And the part that really struck me from that story was the idea of when you were saying that, I asked if he still had a chance to be happy, and the answer was yes. Right. And I thought, wow, like it's again, it comes back to the same point of disconnecting from the culture.
Yes.
Because the culture makes you believe. I remember, I mean, not in any comparison at all, and it's not similar, but just to share it, like I remember when I left the monastery, people always told me that I wouldn't be as close to my teachers anymore. And they said, well, if you move on, you're going to get lost in the material world and Maya, as it's called, illusion, and you won't be able to maintain this. And I remember saying to myself, I was like, I'll never I don't want to let go. And this was so important to me because I'd found my soul teachers, and I want to speak with you about that, around soul teachers. And it was really funny because constantly in different stages of my life, people have said things to me, and that's culture is saying something to me. And actually, culture saying it to me has been a beautiful reminder for me to not make that my reality.
Right.
So instead of feeling bitterness towards culture, I feel this like gratitude towards culture, because every time they say to me, they're like, Jay, when you get married, you'll have less time for spiritual things. I was told that when I got married. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a reminder to me to not do less spiritual things. So I'll make sure that I'm more grounded in my spiritual practice. People said, oh, Jay, when you build a business, like this will happen. When you become an entrepreneur, this will happen. And that was always a good reminder of what I didn't want to let happen. If you want even more videos just like this one, make sure you subscribe and click on the boxes over here. I'm also excited to let you know that you can now get my book, Think Like a Monk, from thinklikeamonkbook.com. Check below in the description to make sure you order today.